We're doing very well with respect to the Hormuz Strait. We took in more oil yesterday than has ever gone through the Strait. We have two things. We have an open strait, and we have a country that will never have a nuclear weapon. Will never, ever have a nuclear weapon. And I think Iran, I can say on a sort of a different scale, is in its own way working out very well. And we're doing very well in terms of negotiating a fair and reasonable deal. If Iran doesn't live up to their agreement, or if they're not behaving, I will do what I have to do.
That's President Trump with a fresh new warning for Tehran to keep up their end of the bargain or, quote, face the consequences, as the Treasury authorizes the temporary sale of Iranian oil for 60 days, allowing Iran to sell crude oil in U.S. dollars for the first time in decades, a concession to Iran. The commander-in-chief further writing on Truth Social, Iran will need to allow nuclear inspectors back into the country, as Vice President J.D. Vance arrived back in the U.S. overnight from Switzerland after nailing down what he called a 60-day roadmap toward a broader agreement with Iran. Secretary of State Marco Rubio heading to the Persian Gulf today for meetings with key U.S. allies as he is building support for these ongoing negotiations. Joining me now is Fox News strategic analyst and Institute for the Study of War's chairman, General Jack Keane. General, it's great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. And you've been looking at this situation and not liking some of it. I want to get your take on this allowance of Iran to sell oil for the next 60 days, potentially raising billions of dollars in new revenue. Your reaction?
Yeah. Well, let me just state, the overall objective here and what we're really doing is we moved into a major diplomatic phase, obviously, and we shut down the instruments of war, trying to achieve the same objectives that we were trying to do with the instruments of war. And we know the reasons, the political and economic issues inside the United States, and we got that. Now, this is coercive diplomacy. And that's truly what it is. And President Trump has emphasized it time and time again. If you don't do X, I'm going to do Y. That is coercive diplomacy. And what we're trying to do here, Maria, is bend our adversary here to our will to meet the maximum objectives that President Trump is attempting to achieve here. And I think there are going to be bumps along the road here as we go into this. And this is early days for sure. And what we're seeing here, and I really appreciate, I don't think we're going to get where we want to get with just a negotiating team. And by that I mean, I believe from time to time the president is going to have to step in and clear the air, so to speak. And it happened this weekend. Remember, one of the things in the deal was it was written in the Memorandum of Understanding, one of the 14 points, that when it came to the Straits of Hormuz, the Iranians, after 60 days, were going to negotiate with Oman and deal with the administration of the Straits, restrictions, etc., which obviously implied control of the Straits. President Trump cleared that up, even though that's what was written. He said the Straits are going to be open and free for the next 60 days and for the 60 days after that. And if they're not, then I'm going to take complete control of the Straits myself and start charging fees. All right? That is an example of coercive diplomacy, and I think we're going to need that from time to time to clear the air here in terms of what is really happening. Because Iran will push back in the details of this, as they have done time and time again. Yeah. 2 years with the Obama administration to get their deal. And we're trying to get it done in 60 days, but we've already been negotiating with them prior to this for 9 weeks. Yeah. So this is not the start point. This is to continue. Now, to get to some of the specifics. Yeah, certainly. The Straits is cleared up. And by the way, yeah, and you made a point of it, oil is flowing through the Straits, and the CENTCOM has opened up those lanes on their side, on the Oman side of the Straits, yeah, and 55, 60 ships have been moving through there despite Iran saying it's closed.
Right, which is a big deal, and this is one of President Trump's priorities, get that strait open.
Yeah, and in dealing with coercive diplomacy, obviously that is an example of it right there. But there are other examples that he has and levers that he has. And obviously at any time, if this deal goes south, he can impose a blockade and shut everything down economically for Iran.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and remember these dates, 9 and 10 June. That was not too long ago. On 9 and 10 June, because Iran was refusing to come to the table, his coercive diplomacy at its zenith, he attacks Iran on the 9th and the 10th of June. And then on the 11th, he is about to attack them again, and they come to the table. Coercive diplomacy. In pure definition. So that's the path we're on. Now, a couple of other points about the MOU. We got to see this thing play out. In my mind, we're taking the sanctions off, which have been there going all the way back to the first Trump administration. We got to see something tangible for doing that. We always said, we didn't say it, the vice president and others have said, we're not going to provide any financial relief to this organization, to Iran, until we're sure that they are operating in good faith and they're going to change their behavior. So there has to be some evidence that that is happening, in my judgment, as we continue to release financial relief to this regime. And that's the reality of it. So there's bumps along the road, to be sure, a clear pathway. It's going to take some time for us to get there. I do believe the Lebanon thing is a real issue. And obviously, the Iran wants it to be the issue. It wants to be center stage there. Because why? They want to preserve Hezbollah. This is their main fighting instrument.
I see.
They don't have a ground force that fights. Hezbollah is their main fighting instrument. Yeah. And they have IRGC officers on the ground with the tactical units in Lebanon fighting against Israel. They have IRGC officers in the command posts at the Hezbollah headquarters and operations centers. Yeah. That's how committed they are to this. So going forward in this is a big deal, and we got to make certain that Hezbollah is abiding by these ceasefires and not building up capability in the south. Yeah. The major lesson learned from October the 7th, and it's clear-eyed in Israelis' minds, and it should be clear-eyed in ours, that you can never again let states on the border build military capacity to be able to attack you. That's what happened in Gaza, and that's what happened on October the 8th. Hezbollah attacked Israel. Yeah, that cannot happen. What have they been doing? Yeah, no, they've been building capability up in the south and attacking. And it's got to stop.
And you're looking for this silver lining. Look, I agree. I give President Trump an enormous amount of credit for trying his hardest to be a diplomat, trying his hardest to be diplomatic and stop the fighting. But is this the right road? That the administration is using sanctions relief as the incentive, the biggest incentive for Iran to make these concessions, like accepting renewed international nuclear inspections. Is that the right incentive? Easing these sanctions that have been crippling and allowing them to generate billions in revenue in the next 60 days. What are they going to do with that money, General?
Well, you know what they're going to do with the money. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind what they're going to do with the money. They're going to recover their military capability first that we've destroyed, and whatever relief they need themselves to be able to function as an organization, and they'll do that. That's what their priorities are. In terms of financial relief, I think we go very, very slow here, and we absolutely make certain that they're taking the steps necessary to get where we need to be. Yes, and that's the impression I thought we were getting when the deal was announced, that they were not going to do anything until we're absolutely convinced that Iran is going to adhere to the major tenets of the deal going forward.
So are we convinced?
And when it comes to the number one objective here is the nuclear issue. And I've said before yesterday, and I applaud the fact that Iran is permitting the IAEA inspectors to come back in. But I truly believe this is President Trump's number one objective. He's got to have people on the ground there, our people, U.S. military experts, civilian and military, who are there to accomplish his objective. They have a bias for one thing only. They're going to achieve the objective that President Trump has given them. And they're going to go anywhere, anytime to find what they need to find and make certain that this nuclear enterprise no longer exists. And we cannot just have the IAEA do it. Do they have good people? Yes, but they've been manipulated by Iran for years. Is their experience worth it to have us have on the team? Of course it is. Yes, it would be valuable. But we need our people there. And Iran's going to push back on that, and likely have. Already, they don't want it, as they will push back on everything else.
It sounds like
this is the value of coercive diplomacy.
It sounds like you're not buying it 100%.
This is why coercive diplomacy is so important.
But we're waiting.
But we have leverage here.
Yeah.
And one of the levers is the one that you mentioned. Money is a lever.
Yeah.
All right. The blockade is a lever. 9 and 10 June are levers.
Okay.
They are all things that we can apply here to accomplish what we want. But on the nuclear thing, we got to get this 100% right. No enrichment, nothing left over in terms of nuclear enrichment that's there now. Dismantle, and we know where some of this is. There are centrifuges and cascades that they could use to develop enriched uranium. We know where that is. All of that has got to go away, 100%. We know what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, there's more verifying to do then, and we'll be watching and talking with you along the way in this upcoming 60-day period to ensure that, in fact, it is going the way President Trump is expecting. General, thanks very much for your insights this morning.
Yeah, great talking to you.
And to you, General Jack Keane joining us. We'll be right back. Stay with us.